On today's show, we interview Mr. Terry Wolf, a parent of a Division I pitcher at Oral Roberts University, and we talk about the approach that he used to help his son become a Division I athlete.
Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Awakening Podcast, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered, unsexy side of player development. Get ready for some knowledge bombs with your host, Geoff Rottmayer.
Welcome to the Baseball Awakening Podcast. I'm Geoff Rottmayer, and today we sit down with Mr. Terry Wolf. Terry is the father of Trey Wolf, a freshman pitcher at Oral Roberts University. Terry, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, Terry, I brought you on today because your son Trey has gone through the process of becoming a Division I athlete, and I thought you could provide some insight to the parents who are listening in on the process that you took as a parent to help Trey fulfill this dream of his.
Sounds good.
Let's start with, at what age did Trey start playing baseball?
He started playing around 8 years old, coach pitch.
And did he play any other sports?
Early on prior to high school, he wrestled, he played basketball, football, and baseball.
Now, do you think that any of those other sports contribute to him being a better athlete?
Oh, I'm sure it did. It's, with different footwork and, winning and losing probably helped some things, building some character, getting along with his teammates and stuff. I'm just guessing that, through the different sports.
Yeah, you nailed it, man. And all those different sports play a role in developing an athlete. Soccer, basketball, wrestling, all the mental toughness and the practice and all the stuff that you said are all super important. I think, and so at what age did Trey start focusing on baseball?
The freshman year of high school was when he just did baseball.
Yeah, and at that time he became a pitcher only, right?
Yeah, so his high school is the largest high school in the state of Oklahoma. There's around 100 kids that try out, and pretty much whenever you make the team, you're either a position guy or a pitcher guy, and he's kind of a bigger guy, slower-footed guy, and so his opportunity was pitching only. And
right, and what age did he start pitching?
He started pitching at around 10, maybe 9, 10, somewhere in there, on just a rec baseball team. On
rec ball, and when did he start playing competitively, if he did?
He played competitive at probably starting around 12, and then probably 13 or 14, more competitive.
Yeah, and knowing what you know now, the culture is kind of messed up in a lot of ways, and you and I have talked about it before, but knowing what you know now, what are your thoughts? I think it was a great route, whether it was planned or not.
Yeah, I would have probably even did a little more of it, because it's like once the competitive tournaments start, it's like a never-ending cycle to where it just keeps going and going. I do like the competitive side for, competitiveness, some good players, and your kids are playing against, if your kid's a pitcher, he's facing good hitters. If he's a hitter, he's facing good pitching, but it limits where you could actually work on, your deficiencies as a player.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I say a lot. And, competitive ball is great, but like you said, it never stops. And when you have the year-round playing, the development side of players get put on the back burner. And so you become, okay at playing games, but the fundamentals is what's going to get you to that next level, and everybody's forgetting that.
Yeah, and there's so much more to even aside from, it's like one part's mental and competitive, one part's developing your stuff, and then the whole other huge part is taking care of your body, movements of your body, strengthening the weakness parts of your body to where that part is just kind of way overlooked. Nobody even worries about that part till something's wrong.
Right. That's very important, and you and I have talked about that. You know, you take pride in kind of doing some research, and I highly recommend parents taking a small interest in doing some research. You know, you took the route that you said this is what's best for my son, and everyone needs to kind of invest in their kid and reach out to people that can help.
Right.
Do what you got to do and understand what you got to do rather than just kind of following the culture. All right, so Terry, let me ask you, let's talk about the time that we went from 12 and under to 13 under, when the fields got bigger and now Trey's playing competitive ball. So what's that transition like?
I didn't notice a whole lot. I mean, it's been a while ago, but I don't think I didn't notice a whole lot. You know, when the mound moved back or the field got bigger, it's maybe an adjustment period, but I didn't notice you know, a wow factor or anything like that. I don't think.
Yeah, and with Trey, a guy that every time he stepped on the field, everyone kind of looked at him and said, wow, you know, this kid can, if he wants to, he can play D1 baseball or even pro ball if he wants to. Did he stand out like that?
No. I mean, you saying that probably is the biggest difference of 13, 14 that, you know, I probably forgot about was at 14, there's probably guys that are, you know, that 6 foot to 6'3" that hit that growth spurt or puberty at 14, and some guys didn't. And Trey was one of those guys, you know, that was more late bloomer guy. So that probably is a big difference of, you know, a lot of guys maturing early.
Yeah, and this game is full of, and you can relate this to golf. This game is full of late bloomers, and coming off a World Series, Chris Sale would be a guy who was considered a late bloomer. So, with all that said, so now Trey realizes that, okay, he's there, and he's likely to be a late bloomer type, whether he knew it or not. Mentally, how did that weigh on him, and how did you, as a parent, just say, "Hey, keep plugging away, keep working hard, love the game, do your thing, and everything will come together"?
I think at a point, you know, you knew that he would eventually transition and get taller and bigger. You just didn't know when that was, and then you don't know how much it'll be. You know, will you grow, you know, 2 or 3 inches or 4 or 5, or, you know, get faster, taller, bigger, stronger. So I started looking at ways, and that's probably about the time that I had contacted you, was he never really had any arm problems, but his arm would get sore sometimes, and I didn't know you know, I've never played baseball. I never played baseball in high school or anything, and I knew so little about baseball that Trey's a left-handed kid, and I was showing him how to pitch right-handed, and that's the way that he stayed. So I knew I needed to find somebody else, so I had, I think I'd seen something about you online, and we went over there for an assessment, and you guys kind of hit it off, and I just knew there had to be, you know, good mechanics and then some good mental stuff. And I think that's around the same time that it was like he believed in himself, but when you have somebody else believe in you, and that's kind of where he started becoming aggressive, or more like a Bulldog mentality was, you know, he's a smaller guy, and just hard work and learning about himself. A lot of that came from that.
Yeah, and I remember Trey coming in, and I saw this kid that was so determined. He wanted it. He was willing to work hard. I mean, dripping in sweat in every session, whether it was hot or cold. And really, he just needed some direction and some guidance, and he was willing to do whatever it took. And I did get to see the transition from, not always being so sure of himself to developing into the Bulldog mentality. And I think, and it's been fun to watch. And I think a lot of it, I always think that the parents, you were very involved, and I think you're kind of buying into and reinforcing some of the things that we were working on played a big role.
Yeah, well, I always, over the years, he had been at different, pitching lessons around town and stuff, and I would always go to the lesson because I didn't know what they were saying, so I would watch the lesson and then see whatever they said. And then I would go home and just look up whatever they were saying, see if it matched up with what, the knowledge I thought, whether it was right or wrong. And and I didn't never really tell Trey my opinion or not. I would just try to, build information off of, was it the right thing or not the right thing? And, he was the one more so, he would tell me this is right or that's not right, or just kept looking for knowledge, I guess.
Yeah, and that was the thing that stood out to me. I've worked with a lot of kids over the years, and I've never had someone who asked the type of questions that he did. He would go home and watch YouTube videos on mechanics, and then, and that was the part that I love. I love when kids want to learn and they ask questions and wanted to get better. Shoot, I remember one time we were working on something, and he sent me a video, and he understood what he needed to work on. And so he went home, and next thing, about an hour, 2 hours later, I got a video from him working on what we were working on with him with a balled up sock thrown into the couch. He was that guy.
I think a lot of it was it was probably even before, that 13, 14-year-old era it was like the kids that were 9, 10, and 11 were really, really good. They were born that way, athletic and, fast or strong or whatever, and then had that early, growth spurt. So, they're still at the, more so the top of the food chain rather. And I think it just made him work really hard. And then there was just a transition period, probably that maybe a sophomore year, later in that sophomore year, that you could start seeing moments, maybe once a month or once, every couple of weeks, you would see something that he did to where it was starting to transition of the hard work starting to pay off. And then it'd be a little while, and then you would see, it again before, maybe that junior year, you start seeing a lot, more consistent transition, and then when that starts happening, you start getting more confident about yourself and believing in your process.
Yeah, that's just it. The whole thing is a process. A lot of people are missing the boat on, when you're 12, 13, 14, all the way to 18 years old, they're constantly changing, and their body is changing, and the awareness is changing. Things are always changing. And so there's always a little transition period, every time that happens. And it's easy to lose. And if you don't keep working in front of a trained eye and buy into a process and trust that process, you're never really going to get anywhere. And you know what? It's slow, it's long, but it's a journey. And the result will show up at the right time.
Yeah, it's a lot of, the cliche of if you put the work in, you'll get something out of it. But most of the time, nobody's going to put that much work in. Most of the time, I just tried to support him. I'd always go to the lesson to see what you had to say or any of his lessons. I'd try to be a part of it and just hang out with him. And then, I'd ask him questions of what he thought and how did it help. And I was always a big encourager, too, of having him write stuff down. Of like if an adjustment was made, carry a little book, write it down, and then, say 6 weeks from now you start struggling, you could go back and look, when I was doing this, I did this to fix it. Maybe it would help, and, maybe it didn't, but it kind of helps you self-evaluate yourself, through, because there's a lot of changes going on through that couple-year process that you could just figure out on your own instead of, having to have somebody else tell you.
Yeah, I love that. And I always tell guys that the sooner you can do that, the better off you're going to be. And, instead of waiting until you're a junior or waiting until you get to college or pro ball, if you can already start this process of self-evaluation, self-assessment, awareness of what your strengths and weaknesses are, and understand what you really need to work on and all that stuff, and not waste years, because there are a lot of guys that say, I want to play D1, but they're wasting time by not understanding who they are or even reaching out to someone who can help them and find out, who they are, what they need to work on, and even just start questioning, and having what you guys are doing with Trey is just encourage by doing all this stuff. So, and it's not the sexiest stuff, nope, it's not sexy, but that's part of the process of being where you want to be. And in Trey's case, he wants to be in the big leagues.
Yeah, it's definitely not for everybody. The dream of playing, whether it's high school baseball or college baseball or pro baseball, the dream's easy, but the day in, day out, because also there's grades in there and doing other stuff. And so what Trey would do is he would go to high school baseball practice till, say 5:30, and then we would come home, get something to eat, and then we would go do a whole nother practice over at your place, 3, sometimes 4 times a week. And he just didn't ever say nothing to anybody. He just, that was kind of his routine, and he would just drag me along to always go. And then there's probably some times where I would back off and, just come up with something else to do. That way he would drive over to your place when he started driving, just so he would know what it takes to, get over here, make the appointment, go to your session, that way it's the ownership of himself, of figuring all that stuff out.
Yeah, and there were times where Trey would walk in just tired, and I could tell you was, but because he just got done with the team practice. But you know what? He came in and he didn't waste time, He went through his practice, he worked hard, and then he came to us and he worked even harder. And that was, he just did not waste any time. He came in, he knew what he wanted to work on, and he got right to work. And I told him so many times, I said, if you keep putting in your work, you're going to like the end result. And he bought into that. And he said, I'm going to come in here for an hour. I'm going to work hard, not waste time, stick to my routine, go home, and then start all over again today.
And also, I was thinking, too, so when he started freshman year and tried out for the high school team, so then that summer, all the guys went to summer ball of whatever team you could play on for the summer. And so that summer we elected to not do summer baseball and just train all summer and try to get, stronger and bigger and faster and, more flexible, things like that. So that's all he did that summer, which was, it was, I don't know that it was tough for him, but it was tough for us as parents to believe in the process of supporting when you go to the games. And obviously all the parents are out there, and in sports, all the parents talk of, your kid has to play for this team or that team or this coach or that coach. So that was pretty tough to believe in that. And that's what he did that summer. And the following summer, he did play some tournaments, but probably even that summer, it would have been better to do the exact same thing, even more, just building off of the first one. But hindsight's 2020, so.
Yeah, and I think a lot of parents really want to help their kids, and of course we all want to help our kids, but it's really easy to kind of get caught up into, well, this is what everyone else is doing, so it's got to be the right way. And I tell guys all the time that the showcase stuff is great when you're ready.
Yeah.
And when you're ready, and you have the desirable number, and you're ready to showcase something, then it's a great thing. But when you're not ready, it's almost a waste of money. So you'd be better off taking that money and investing in training a little bit and get that confidence up, get the skill set where it needs to be, and go out there and really and when you're ready, until you're ready to showcase something. So
yeah, exactly.
So with that, let's talk a little bit about, Trey going into his freshman year. Talk a little bit about how that season went. He playing freshman ball at Broken Arrow, a great program. He makes the team. He's a pitcher only. How did that year go? He's smaller than everyone else. He's younger for his grade, and he's probably not their main guy.
Yeah, there was so when he tried out for the team, he actually had a broken arm, so he couldn't. He broke or he had a broken pinky diving back to first base, so he couldn't try out on that day. And there was about 100 kids tried out, and they took like 36 kids. They made 2 teams for the summer, and then at the end of that summer season, they get it down to about 22 kids. So he had a broken hand for the tryout, so he had a private tryout like 2 months later, and the coach told him when he came to try out that the team is pretty full, but there's a pitcher-only spot. You could do that, not guaranteeing no innings or playtime. Or, when we left there, we also we lived on the dividing edge of the next town, so there was some thought of he could go to the next town and try out over there as a smaller school, maybe more opportunity to still play a base or swing the bat or pitch some too. And we just decided, he was more, I want to do there, and I'm okay with just pitching. And that's what he did. And so the freshman year started, and he was not so much on the radar that we played the entire schedule through that summer. And me and my wife told him there was one game left, and he hadn't pitched at all. He had played first base and third base, and just sparingly. And my wife and me told him, you need to tell those 2 coaches, they were high school kids that had just graduated and stayed back to coach the next summer team before you actually make the high school team. And I said, well, you need to approach them and say, hey, coach, I pitch. Where am I at in the rotation? And he was kind of timid. He wasn't going to ask them. And I guess finally he was like, the time's over. I got to ask. So he asked them, and they said, oh, shoot, Wolf, we didn't even know you were a pitcher. So he the next day they put him out there. He started, and the assistant head coach was there, and he had a good game. And so he made the team, and then the freshman year, he I don't remember exactly, but I would say he, probably started 3 or 4 games maybe. He could throw strikes. That's what, now that he's graduated high school, I've talked to the coach quite a bit. And he said he liked him because he threw a lot of strikes and just didn't walk people, and and he was a hard worker. So that's kind of what kept giving him the chance to come back.
Yeah, and for our listeners to understand, what was his velocity as a freshman?
I think as a freshman he threw 69. That was that summer. So that was probably like in October of that freshman year, I guess. Probably around 68, 69, somewhere around there. I mean, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think he was right around 67, 68, right around there. So, all right. So now going through his freshman year, he went out there and he competed. He showed those coaches what he can do. He was throwing strikes, getting guys out. What was his mentality like? Did you see him kind of gain confidence as he went through the season, as he was getting playing time and getting guys out? Now he had some rough outings. Everyone does for the most part, but for the most part, he did pretty good. For a freshman. So, what was his mentality like? Did you see him grow, get more confidence? And again, at this time, he's putting in work with us. He's working there. He's working his tail off. And you can kind of see him transition into this player.
Yeah, I think throughout so then you went from like that October to the starting of the baseball season in February. I think at the start of that season, he was like 79 to 80, something like that, speed. And he was just throwing strikes. And towards the end of that season, I think he was like 80 to 83 or something. And his confidence was getting better, mixing with the boys on the team and just continuing to work at practice and go work at your place. So it just kept growing from there. At that time, you were doing a lot of mental stuff too. I'd actually forgotten about this. I don't know what the machine was called, but you're concentrating on doing other things while concentrating on this video. And so growing up, he was more of he was like solid B's and, maybe a C, maybe 2 C's, something like that. But after that summer, he was like all A's or all A's and 1 B. I don't know if that's what helped that, but it didn't hurt it, and he didn't do anything differently other than that was the only thing I remember then of him doing differently was a lot of mental things, of processing a lot of stuff while other things are going on. Or I think at that time you were doing it for like listening to people in the stands or the other team chanting at you or, trying to arouse you up. So I do remember that.
Yeah. We had a system called the Neuro Tracker, and the idea was to kind of, train to slow the game down and to get more focus. And obviously the benefit is across the board, with the sport, with school or whatever it may be, your ability to focus was being improved with that system. So, and I remember every time he came in, he was very competitive with it, and he wanted to get better, and he would. And end result, it helped him on the field and in the classroom. So, with the subject of school, his freshman year, he got all A's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so now Trey at this point is understanding, hey, and maybe you and I talked about this, but going to college, you are likely not going to get a full ride scholarship in baseball. There's just more money in academic than there is in baseball. And Trey bought into that. And you guys, his parents, reinforced that. And he worked hard at his grades, and end result, and I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, he went to ORU and got a lot of academic money.
Yeah, that was looking back, that may have been the second most important part, or well, it's probably. I mean, you got to have something, athletically to get you there, but the most crucial thing was your GPA and your ACT score. That was the hugest part of, when the colleges were looking, it was like, we're already talking to you because we're interested, but what are your GPA or your ACT? Because if those are not very good, then we're kind of done talking,
Yeah, because these guys are only allocated so much baseball money, and they're not going to give up more baseball money if you can't get the grades and stay eligible. So grades, and we talk about it all the time, for the people that are listening, enforce to your kids to work hard on their grades. It's important.
I kind of took it as if you can't depend on yourself in the classroom, we're not going to depend on you in the field.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's kind of the message I got from when they were, we'd listen to them and talk to them.
Absolutely. So let's now jump ahead to his junior year. So Trey is throwing what's he throwing around this time?
So junior year he started, I think around 85, 86, somewhere in there, I think. And then right before the season ended of that junior year, he was like 88. And then the month after the season ended, where he did play some summer ball, we were playing a tournament at TCU where they had the video board. And I didn't go to that game, but people were sending me texts, and that's the first time that we've seen him hit 90 on their little lighted board, and somebody had texted it to me. So that was a pretty big, crucial year of gaining strength in his legs and his hip mobility and stuff like that, and then throwing strikes with that increased speed. And I would say that year is probably when, he's been going to baseball and going to your place and believing in it and all that. And I think a little bit into that season is probably when he started seeing the benefits of everything, and everything was starting to come together of believing in himself and trusting everything. I think that's when a lot of routines were made from him that I didn't notice the routines until later in that summer. Some parents would, text me and ask about, why does Trey do this or do that? And I told them I didn't know. I didn't even realize he did that stuff. So then I would watch for, a certain band workout or the days he would start. He would go eat at a certain restaurant every single time. He would do a certain arm care thing every single time. I didn't notice. I didn't watch for that stuff, but it just tried to keep him consistent. And then also, kind of jumping ahead, but when those colleges started looking or calling, that's one of the first things they kind of noticed was being consistent. Like I don't know about the routine stuff, but the results of doing the same thing every time instead of if you were a hitter and you go 3 for 3 and then 2 months go by before you go 2 for 3, I think it was something like that.
Yeah, Trey and I, and that was the very first thing and that's what I sell in my facility is a structured routine, and it's something that takes time to develop because guys have to figure out what works for them, what doesn't work for them, but they have to start the process of trying to figure out what all that is, and it's tough, and it can be very tough at a young age for them to do that. But that was the one thing that I saw over the years is that he was getting very consistent. He knew what he needed to do to get ready. And the routine kind of came together that year, and he had a great year. And that led into and carried into summer ball, and then that led to ORU, OU, and all these guys calling him.
Yeah, so that junior year, he was so at the high school level is there's conference play or district games 2 days a week, and then you play a third or fourth game during the week it's not a district game. So a lot of people that go to the games are hoping, and everybody hopes that you win every game or win as many as you can, but realistically, only those Monday, Tuesday games count, for your chance to play for district championship or go to the state tournament or whatever. So he was not one of those guys, even that junior year. So he was not a Monday, Tuesday guy. He was a, third game guy starter or a fourth game guy starter. And so that year he went 8-1 on the mound for his record, and he didn't have a lot of walks. And so we won district that year, and he pitched in that game, and that team I think had beat us the night before, or it almost beat us or something. It was a double elimination game. So I think what had happened is they were up on us like 12-2 or something in the second inning, and we ended up coming back and beating them that night. So then Trey pitched the next night, and I think he gave up one run. We ended up winning district like 5-1 ball game or 5-0 ball game or something. And that's when I think a lot of the players on his team started, kind of accepting him as a player. He always had the coaches up at the school, they were always helpful with telling him this or that and taking him under their wing. But I think that win and through the work ethic there, I don't know, like if they believed in him more or they just accepted that, he's one of our guys now. I could see that happening that year too. So that was a good thing, and a lot of that comes with baseball's like you got to produce. So if you don't produce, don't expect nothing, and you just got to keep producing and doing what you're supposed to do.
Receive a Baseball Awakening decal by subscribing on iTunes and leaving an objective review. To claim your decals, screenshot the review and email it to Geoff at baseballawakening.com. That's Geoff at baseballawakening.com, and we'll get that your way.
Yeah, and Trey, he was the guy that wasn't afraid to go to his coaches and ask for feedback. And I think that's important. And I used to tell him, and I think you guys did too, was to make sure that when you ask for feedback, that you accept whatever that feedback is, whether it's good or bad, because you don't want to hear what you want to hear. You want to hear what you need to hear.
Right.
Right. So he was good at that. So now look, now he's in his junior year. He's playing summer ball. He's doing really well. All these schools are calling him. Talking a little bit about what that period was like. All this hard work is coming together. He's getting attention now. And for the people that are listening, remember, prior to this point, and Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, Trey wasn't getting a lot of attention. And then all of a sudden he blossomed. And I would tell guys, if you keep putting in work, you will blossom. And he blossomed that year. Then a lot of opportunities came his way. And he was like, what was that period like for Trey and for you guys with all the investment that you put in emotionally, financially, and with time?
It was kind of crazy because you're, as a parent, you want your kid to get whatever they're dreaming for, and as the kid, they think that they know what they're going for. But when it did happen, I don't think that he knew really what to do because it just kind of all happened at once. One of the coaches up at the high school put him in to go to a tournament in a town about 2 hours from our house where you stay with a host family and you play baseball all week. And there's teams that come there all the way from Alaska, Tennessee, Texas, Arizona. And so he stayed with that host family, and some schools watched, and he pitched well that day. And there was two junior colleges talked to him that day, and then this Oral Roberts, where he goes now, was there to watch him, and they talked to him a little bit, and then like right after that, he went to another tournament at Oklahoma State that is kind of, I'm not sure how you get put in that, but anyway, last minute he was asked to be in that. And so he went to that and did really well. Another parent actually took him to that. And so before they had made it back home, he had received calls from Oklahoma State, and Oral Roberts, and a couple other junior colleges. And so then it was kind of at the point of, what are we doing? It was kind of, what decision do you make, and who goes here? And they're asking them to come check out their school, come on visits, and it was just kind of like our heads spun. It was kind of like you work so hard to get to something, and then when it happens, you kind of don't know what to do of what's the next process. And so it was like one of those deals to where you work super hard. You could go to 45 tournaments, throwing a certain speed or hitting the ball a certain speed or being running a certain speed. And you're just spinning wheels and wasting time. And you go to one or two tournaments and do the things they're looking for or hit the speeds they're looking for, and it's immediate feedback. They're gonna find you, And there's some schools that called him. I'd never seen those schools ever in a stand or at a tournament that he played at, and they're calling. I don't know how they've seen him or what have. People talk once you do whatever they're looking for. So that part of it was probably the craziest part, and it was like, what decision does he want to do, and things like that. So we went on some visits to some schools and tried to see what is the best fit for him, and so kind of went from there.
Yeah, that was an exciting time, from the outside looking in, seeing how much work Trey put in and seeing how much you and your wife put into Trey, with time, and financials and emotionally, all that investment kind of came together. So it was pretty exciting to see. And I tell Trey all the time, I'm really glad you bought in and you allow yourself to bloom into what you are. And he did. And it was just exciting to see.
It is tough to realize, too, of kids trusting other adults, whatever their process is. Because if you go off of a process different than the norm of, trying to get your kid on the best competitive team or the competitive team that wins all the time, or around a group of parents that know what they're supposed to know to get their kids on, a better program. And then you go a different direction that nobody else is going, that is about a process and learning and knowing your body and things like that, you're kind of going in uncharted waters with no, you haven't seen another kid do that around here. So it's all or nothing once you start going that way. Luckily for him, it all worked out. And, now looking back on it, a large group of kids that went the other way, it didn't work out because they were, a large group of the kids that played at that age are still the same player they were at that age.
Yeah, and that was the exciting part. Here I am, a guy from Florida, and I come to Tulsa where I know no one, and I'm speaking a different language than everyone else. And it was kind of tough to get some buy-in, but Trey, you and your wife all decided to try it out, and I'm appreciative of that. Trying it out, but not only trying it out, but sticking to it, because you could have easily have said, this guy, what's he talking about? And maybe you guys had those conversations, but, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But anyway, you guys stuck with it, so it's exciting to see this next step at ORU, and he wants to, Trey wants to play in the big leagues, and so now he's working hard to get himself ready to compete against guys that are a little bit older, and he's had a pretty decent freshman fall, at ORU, and that's exciting. So we'll see what happens here in the spring, and so but for now, he's working hard in this next step, which is to prepare himself for professional baseball.
I can even see there is, you basically have to start over. It's a different process. It's the process of, all 9 kids can hit that you're facing, and the classwork's tougher, the schedule's longer. The workouts in the mornings, workouts in the evenings, study hall, adjusting to new teammates, and so all that is a process, and then figuring out how to pitch to that, and kind of growing from there, coming up with a new plan, and it's all an adjusting process of figuring yourself out, and then he's even going there. He's been over to your place, picking your brain and asking you what you think of this, and so it's just a growing deal. I guess it never ends,
Right, and when you go to a D1 level or even a JUCO or whatever, anytime you go to that next level, a lot of things start to kind of come into play. There are guys that are away from home, guys have girlfriends at another school, or they have more schoolwork than they're used to, and they just have to adjust to a schedule that's committed to the baseball lifestyle, and it's all day long, every day, and there's some adjustment to be made. And I think if you really love the game of baseball, you'll figure it out. But it is different, and we can talk about it all day, but until you've experienced it, it's different. And I think he's doing a great job kind of making the transition.
That's even like before we was talking about freshman to sophomore and sophomore to junior. He hasn't had that. Another jump from junior to senior was, another velocity jump. Towards the end of that year, he's topping out at 93, and it was like, some games were 89, 91, some games were 90, 92. That velocity just kept growing, and he kept looking, and so like the hugest jump from junior to senior was junior year. He had like 44 strikeouts, and then senior year he had 116 or 19 strikeouts, and he's facing the same 6A team. So that just the increased velocity, and then getting the command dialed in, because I think he pitched 70-something innings and he had like 11 walks. So it's just throwing strikes.
Right. And he had the trust of his coaches, and they knew that, they knew he was going to get out there, and they knew what they were going to get out of him, because he was just very consistent.
Yeah, and that year he was a district starter guy. So it just kind of, you just got to stick with the process, but you got to go all in. You can't, work out one day a week and then put 25 tweets on Twitter of how hard you're working. You just got to be quiet and go do your stuff. And if somebody else is having to push you to do it, you're probably not going to make it. It is not. If your parents got to, drag you along, you're probably not going to make it. And then another thing that I wish I had known earlier on was, if your kid really wants to play college baseball, if he's a decent player and he just works hard and has awesome grades, there's a place to play for every kid. There's like this stigma of, well, they're recruiting kids in 8th grade or 7th grade, or, if your kid's a sophomore, there's no money left. That's a bunch of BS. My kid was a senior or even a junior, and there was colleges that had plenty of money left. I mean, there was, so even his senior year, there was schools calling, and he was already committed somewhere that still had money. Big, programs. So that's I think that's a deal from like agencies wanting you to play all summer, is building this. And there are some kids in, 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade that do get committed, but that's not where all the spots are.
Right. Yeah. And it seems to be, you're starting to see a handful of guys that are committing, really young. And I'm not sure that's good for the game, but that's really another conversation for another time. But everyone else kind of gets caught up into that emotion. And if you got to understand that if you're good enough, you have the right numbers, you're consistent, you work hard, you have good grades, there's a place for you to play. So now, when Trey was the guy who went in and kind of feeling like whether he knew it or not, was a late bloomer type. So he went in throwing 67, 68, 69. He left high school throwing 93. And he did that by working hard. He did that by buying in and trusting to a process, taking care of himself, working on routines, setting goals, having you and your wife encouraging him and all that stuff. So I feel like the parents, Trey did a lot of it on his own, but I think you and your wife deserve a lot of credit for committing to getting him to training 4 days a week, enforcing what was being taught, encouraging him to work hard, because there are people out there that are pretty hard on their kids, and they're not really giving them the proper training and the proper guidance that they need. This game's hard, and it's not going to be great performance after great performance after great performance. You got to put in the work. You got to learn to be consistent. You got to show up, and that's with everything. The parents, you got to commit to getting your kid to practice. You got to commit to getting them to training. You got to be consistent with that, because consistency is the key. And if the parents are consistent, then it's going to help them as well.
Yeah, and sometimes, like working with you, he would say he wouldn't even worry about he never worried about the win or loss. He would just break it down to, he would write in his little notebook of whatever pitch he was working on for that day, whether it was a fastball, a changeup, a curveball, whatever. I would see him writing sometimes of, he threw this pitch on this count and it was good. The batter did this, and so whatever he threw, say he was working on his curveball, he didn't worry about all those other pitches that day. So say they lost or won, he won if he threw that pitch and that count and got whatever he was trying to get out of it. That's all he focused on, instead of worrying about, I walked 2 guys, give up 2 hits, and we lost, or whatever. just break it down into smaller wins, I guess. Same as maybe a hitter, the hitter's looking for a certain pitch on a certain count, and he goes 0 for 4, but he never really got the pitch he was looking for, or maybe he hit it well and got out, or whatever.
Yeah, that's the conversation that we have. We text a lot, and one of my first questions is always, as a pitcher, my first question is always, how did your arm feel? Because I want to know how his arm feel, because your arm is everything, and if you can't throw, you can't play. So that's always my first question. And then I'm always asking, so what are you working on? How are you doing with it, and what can we do to improve it? Because he was the guy who was aware of what he needed to work on, for the most part.
That's probably of the, not necessarily the freshman, sophomore year, but more so the middle part to last part of the junior year and the senior year is kind of when a lot more kids or families start hearing about that he was coming over to your place. And the number one question that they would call me and ask or ask him was, how come his arm never hurts? Well, I don't know. And, they wanted to know what the process was of he doing it. Or how is he recovering, things like that, because that was all these kids' arms or hurt, can't play, or having surgeries, things like that, to where his arm didn't hurt. So he always felt that he had the same process, the recovery process. So just doing that all the time. And I think, some parents or kids or whatever was noticing that, and they would just call and ask. And so I, sent some kids over there over the years, and his buddy went with him last year, which was, really helped that kid out a lot. And the good thing was that kid was the same mentality of kid,
Right. Yeah. We live in a culture where kids don't want to admit that their arms hurt. So what I had to do, and I worked hard at this, was developing the trust for Trey to feel like he can open up and be honest about how his arm was feeling and everything else in general. So, and that took some time. It probably took that first year to really figure out what his solution was to keep his arm healthy, because I remember the evaluation sheet, and I had a spot on there with a scale 1 to 10. How bad did your arm hurt? And he had a 7 on his shoulder and an 8 on his elbow. So it took some time, but he really bought in, and he developed his own routine. And that was the big focus, a routine that he developed that he felt worked for him, and so that he can be consistent with it, because his arm is everything as a pitcher.
Yeah, and, if there's times to where his arm is sore or he thinks something don't feel right, he usually calls you and says, hey, this, what do I need to do here, or get me back in line on this or something, it's just.
Yeah, and a lot of time what we'll do, my first process is, let's go back and look at your routine. What have you been doing or not doing? And then we'll kind of take a look at the mechanics, and a little tweak here and there can make a big difference, both, physically and mentally.
Yeah, that's, I think when he started college, he was trying to find that routine and find himself. And it seemed like the first few games that I watched that he pitched in, it was he was throwing strikes, trying to figure it out, and he was not giving up a lot of hits, but the couple that he would give up were harder hit than, so you'd go through a while and then boom, a hard hit ball. Go through a while, boom, a hard hit ball. And so he was trying to figure that out, and so he had a couple of those outings. And then now he's had 3 or 4 outings where hasn't given up a run, or some of them he hasn't even given up a hit. So you can see that he's figuring out the process of what works for him there. And probably the huge part of that came from you have an increased workload of practice. So now how do you stay fresh on the day you throw? Whatever that is, I don't know, but I can see that it's starting to figure out, and his velocity is starting to grow again, or stay more consistent at the higher level. And he's developed some better secondary pitches with more movement that are more consistent.
Yeah, and I remember asking him, what are you finding is the biggest challenge right now as you make the transition? Would it be the physical component, the mental component, or the emotional component? And he said it was mental. He said, I got to figure out how to pitch and get guys out, because it used to be I could miss over the plate and still throw it by a guy. But now that's not the case. I got talented, very talented hitters around me who are older, 22, 23, and he's younger typically for his grade. And so now he's thinking more about the game and more about pitching, which is a great thing.
Yeah, it's just a continual growth. Just learning about yourself and where he's at now. There's super teammates of, if he's struggling with something, they'll tell him what works for them, and then it's, it's kind of, that's how ideas work, I guess. I see somebody do something that's better than what I'm doing, I'll just steal that idea, and then I see somebody else do it, and I'm like, yeah, that don't seem to work. Well, I just won't use that part, and that's kind of what I've seen him do. Is you're just constantly taking knowledge from whoever, kind of research what your thoughts are on it, and if you can use it, use it. If you don't. But you just got to keep taking in new information of new ways to do things, or sometimes there's not a better way to do it, but a lot of times there is.
Right, yeah, that's the cool part about that transition. Now you got guys, you got 25, 30 guys, and every single one of them want to be there. And they want to play baseball, and they want to get better, and they'll do whatever they can to help each other. And in high school, you have guys that are just content with playing high school baseball, and that's fine. But now you're at a level where everybody wants to be there.
Yeah, I've noticed. I even talked to yesterday was the family day for the school. And I talked to several other pitchers' parents, and just the kids are all there to help one another. Nobody's worried about you pitching, taking my spot, or me taking your spot, or whatever. They're just all there to help one another. We're all trying to be better as a team, or get to whatever your next goal is. But they're there. It's like they're holding you accountable to do a good job as you're holding them accountable, and you just kind of grow together. I mean, it's exciting to hear him talk about their team deals and what the next whatever his next goals are, or next steps, and it's harder and harder and harder. So,
yeah, I love hearing about it too. It's exciting. So Terry, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I'd like to end the conversation with what advice. We have a listener who has a ball player whose goal is to play Division I. And there's a lot of different routes to get there. So we can talk about that another time. But we have someone who's listening, and their son's goal is to play Division I baseball. What would be your advice as a parent to help them help their son?
At what age you talking about? A young kid or a high school kid, or what?
Well, let's do them all. Let's start with 10 to 14, before high school.
So at a young age, I'd probably, like to say, if I had another kid and he was a 10-year-old, I would take him over to you and figure out, you're going to do an assessment of what's all the good stuff that he does. Is he fast? Can he hit hard? Can he throw hard? Figure all the good things out. And then you're going to figure out all his deficiencies of how's his hips, how's his, mind, how's his mental stuff, work ethic. Figure out whatever you are deficient at, and then spend until you get to high school of working all those things, because that's, say till you're a junior in high school or middle part of that junior year, anything you do before that doesn't matter. None of those games matter. They're, I do think you're playing those, you do need those, you got to play baseball and you need some games, but you don't need to spend, $10,000, $20,000 flying all over the place to find that out. So, literally you could take, now that I've done it once, I could get a kid and take him over to you, figure out all those deficiencies, and then when say he was a pitcher and he's throwing the velocity that schools are looking for, and he has played baseball, throughout the time, just not, at the level of flying all over the place, just, play in your state or your town. And then if you wanted to, say your kid did want to go out of state, well, maybe that junior year you go to some tournaments out of state. And when he hits that numbers that they're looking for, your phone's going to ring. And if he don't, then, it's realistic. You could run him all over town and have him, throw 80 to 82 as a junior and go to 45 showcases. They're not going to call. You're giving them too much to anticipate of if this could happen or that can happen. Just wait till you can do it, and then just go do it. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and it's not for everyone, but it is for someone. Being able to play this game at a high level. Now, granted, there are other routes that you can take. You can go D2, D3, and all those other levels, but there's still work involved. You can't just wake up one day and say, I want to play baseball and expect to get to a certain level. No, you got to work hard, and the higher you want to go, the further you want to play, the harder you got to work.
Yeah, that's, the same way of going to a junior college. All those kids there, they're the same kids at the D1 schools. They're all good players. There's every kid that is at a junior college had something that, they chose to go there. It was a good fit for them. Maybe grades caused them to go there. You could have 4 or 5 kids on that team that, they were about to get drafted and decided to go there to get drafted the next year. There's all different kinds of reasons for kids to go to different places too,
Right. So what's your advice for the high school players' parents?
The high school guys. So say you were a freshman. I would have probably did your high school season, and you're going to have to decide of, not everybody's going to say, well, I want my kid to not swing a bat and be a pitcher only. So you may, make the move to the next town and if we would have made that move, it could have been a whole different outcome. Trey is 6'2", 250-pound kid. He could swing the bat pretty good too. but we didn't make that move, but somebody else could. So you just play your high school games, and then in the summer, just figure out whatever all your weaknesses are, of whatever, if you're a catcher, a hitter, or, shortstop, and just continue to, like with you track everything. So it's kind of, if you're a hitter or a pitcher and you're thinking you're getting better, you got data to show you're getting better. This week you didn't get better. This week you didn't. And then now you are, to prove what's working and what's not, to where all we have, if you go play, say you do a 30-game session in the summer with the travel ball team, you just kind of value that you're getting better if your pitcher getting outs or your hitter getting on base, when you might have pitched on the day that their ace didn't show up, or you batted on the day their ace didn't show up, so you got 3 hits. Or you pitched on the day that their 3 big guys, couldn't go to the tournament, and you threw a 1-hitter or something. You're not valuing real data, to where when you go hit a baseball and they're tracking how hard you hit it, or you throw a baseball, not just fastball, but your other pitches too. That's real documentation to show I'm getting better. Or like one thing I did notice you did different than other, like when you go to hitting or pitching lessons, most guys just take your money, tell your kid a few cues to do while they're pitching, and then they throw about 70 to 80 pitches, and then afterwards they'll talk about mechanical issues, and then you're going to not do that again probably until it's time to go back to that pitching lesson next week, to where you're stopping it and doing it throughout the session, but you're also collecting data on different types of throws to know, if you're weak in this area of throw, then this part of your body is still deficient. So strengthen that part to make that throw stronger. So just little areas. So I'd probably, a high school kid do that the freshman summer, then play your sophomore season, do that again. And then in that junior summer, or that junior year, you're at high school, and then if your numbers are where they should be, that junior summer is probably the summer to, you're kind of running out of time, and that's the time to, go play in the summer to, get looked at by schools, and that's also the summer of, if you did the process right, you should see the games that you need. But there is some guys that maybe that don't happen, and so your senior year, there's still some guys that are getting offered during that senior season, and even as the season ends. So that's probably the biggest thing is, like you said, save your money and just work on getting better, and then once you're in that, get online and research some kids that you think your kid's about the same size or would be the same size eventually. And, how fast do they run? How hard do they hit? How fast do they pitch? And that's, kind of, you did that a lot too. Trey would tell you a picture, you pull it up on the screen and kind of, what's he doing different? Or,
yeah, and we talked a couple times throughout this conversation about getting the numbers. So let me just kind of share with our listeners what that really means. So if I'm a guy and I go into the high school season and I'm hitting 500, but I have 38 singles and my active ball speed is 78 to 80. That 500 really doesn't mean much because you have to take in account the competition. So it's almost like that 500 doesn't really matter because that 78 to 80 mile an hour active ball speed isn't going to translate at that next level. So when we talk about numbered, we're talking about you need the active ball speed numbers, the velocity numbers, and you need consistency of these numbers. And those numbers, and you can go on the internet and find out what the baseline for your age. And that's what we did, and that's what Trey did. And I do this for our guys. So, but unfortunately, we live in a time where that's your end. Once you get the number, then they'll kind of start to take a closer look at you. But prior to that, even though you can play, but the numbers aren't there, and I'm not saying this is always, but it improves your odds if your numbers are there, and the odds of your attention goes up. So I hope that clarified the thing. I'm going to do a podcast on that one later. So, but anyway, Terry, my good friend, that was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. Sure, the listeners will learn a lot. Thank you.
That's I had fun, man. It's been a process that I've got to tag along with, and it's been fun, man.
I'm Geoff Rottmayer, and thank you for listening to our conversation on the Baseball Awakening podcast. Stay tuned for our recap show tomorrow.